there's ideas that are thrown around all the time that don't all come from me. But it's like, and the podcast was actually one of them. I've been asked to do a podcast for several years by different companies, and I kept saying no to it. Why'd you just roll your eyes at me?
Because for the longest time, both Lev and I were like, I think we want to start a podcast. My mom was like, no, that's not a good idea, guys.
I don't know about you, but I love to colorfully highlight my Bible. Mr. Pen is the brand of Bible highlighters that I use. Mr. Pen is a company dedicated to creating pens and highlighters specifically to be used in your Bible. With over 1 million 5-star reviews on Amazon, they are the most popular Bible highlighters and pens on the market. To get 10% off your first Mr. Pen order, go to CandacePens.com. Join me in diving into the word in 2025. Life can feel like a roller coaster, but it's better when we go through it together. Welcome to the Candace Cameron Bure Podcast. We share conversations about life's challenges, celebrations, and everything in between. Season 9 has been Girls Under Pressure with my guest co-hosts, Allie Schnacky and my daughter, Natasha Bure. And this is our final episode. Come join us. Ladies, I'm going to miss you so much.
I can't believe this, guys.
I mean, one of you I get to see for dinner.
Yes.
Wait, that's right. I'm the only one that's
I know. I'm so sad.
Wow, that's horrible.
Flying all the way to another coast.
I know. Best coast, East Coast, West Coast. Sorry, guys. I don't even mean that when I say it.
That's so funny. I love both coasts.
I love both coasts, yeah.
We lived on the East Coast in Florida for 10 years.
I couldn't believe that. Natasha just told me.
Yeah.
I would never picture you guys would be in Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fort Lauderdale.
Miami.
But yeah, it was good. So, but I love the West Coast too. I mean, I'm native.
Honestly, I feel like Florida and LA have so many similarities. I feel like when I come here, it's like my second home.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of how it was for us growing up. We'd bounce back and forth.
Totally. Well, good thing for FaceTime and texting and Instagram.
Only if you can remember my name.
It's Allie. I'll never forget your name.
Ask her in a month and see what she says.
I know, we're going to.
Are you kidding? Okay, so today is our final episode, and I thought we would round it off with talking about your calling and your purpose. And we actually did a whole season on finding your purpose. It was season 2. So if you haven't listened to that, go back. That whole whole season is with Heather McFadden. But of course, I want to hear it from your perspective in your 20s. I want to hear about the pressures of finding your calling and your purpose, and even if you've found it already. So who wants to start? How do you find your calling?
I feel like that's such a daunting, heavy question.
It is.
Yeah, it really is.
I remember it kind of brings back the same feeling of when I was in high school and I didn't know what I was going to do afterwards. And people would say, what are you doing with your life? Where are you going to college? And I just wanted to scream because I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's
and
what
that's
it feels
normal.
like.
A lot of people don't know what they want to do out of high school, let alone having found your purpose in your 20s or your calling.
Yeah. And I just think that what I've realized in my own life, and I think it's with all of us, is so many times we would love to see picture from beginning to end, but that's just not how life is. And the quicker we can grasp our heads around that when it comes to our purpose and our calling, the more free and we're going to be, honestly, and the more we're going to enjoy life. And so I truthfully believe that what I'm called to do right now is going to look different than what I'm called to do in the next couple of years because it's a journey. But I'm excited to talk about this today because I'm still figuring it out too.
Yeah. What about you, Natasha?
What was the question? I
feel like
had to ask in every episode.
Yeah, that might be the name of this whole season. What was the question?
Because I'm so intently listening and then I just forget what you said. So good.
Do you feel like you've found your calling or purpose in life?
Yeah, I do. I also think that things like that are ever changing as I'm growing older and my, interests are expanding and things like that. I remember when I was younger, I was so desperate to just know what I was supposed to be doing with my life to the point where I, put you and Papa on such a pedestal. And I told you guys this story about college when neither of my parents went to college and they had very successful careers from such a young age. And I remember when I was in kindergarten and first grade and all my friends were like, well, when we get older, we're going to go to this college and we're going to go to this high school. And I was like, well, I'm not going to college because my parents didn't go to college. Like, it's so easy to see the people around you who have it figured out and just think that your life is going to turn out the exact same way. And I feel like there is such this pressure. I'm especially seeing it with Max right now in his life, my youngest brother, just navigating who you want to be, what your interests are, and also exploring all avenues, which I think is so important and something that, you guys have really encouraged us. Whatever we want to be, that's okay. We just have to work hard at it and be the best that we can be. And so I would just encourage anyone to really go and try it all, figure it out.
Do you think that your calling is what your job is?
I think the two can be different, but can also be in the same sphere.
I truthfully believe that your career looks different than your calling, but your calling's the same no matter what career that you have. So for example, I could be called to full-time ministry and it could literally look like working in a church, posting videos online about God all the time. But if you're a believer, I truthfully believe you have the same calling, even if you're a teacher in the education system.
Yeah.
Or you're working at the supermarket down the street, because we're all called as the body of Christ to share the good news of Jesus everywhere we go. And so honestly, Candace and Natasha, it gets me thinking so much about how stressed out I was when I was in like my 19th, 20th year and all of my friends were at college and I was taking a gap year. I honestly felt like the world was moving forward and I was the one person that was stuck behind. But I also knew that my parents told me, Allie, you could go to college for a career you don't know about, but you're just going to waste that time and waste that money instead of just taking a year and really seeking God and seeing what he has for you. And so I took that gap year and I remember wrestling with God, which looked like just conversations with him saying, Lord, what are you calling me to do? I have this heart for ministry, but there's no opportunities. I'm waiting for like this. He gave me a vision that I was going to be speaking, but I didn't know how that was going to happen. I wasn't even on social media at the time, and it reminds me so much of the story of Joseph in the Bible. When God gave him a vision, he gave him a dream. And instead of that dream coming true right away, it took 13 years for him to become second in command in Egypt. And what that taught me was God has a process for things. And what he's looking for us to do right now is just ask ourselves the question, God, what have you given me right now? And how can I use it to bring glory to you? And so in that moment, that's what I did. I said, Lord, I might not have any connections. I'm not on social media, but what do I have? Well, I have a heart to love you. So I'm going to start a Bible study. And that's what I did. That's how everything started,
That's such a great step.
Yeah.
And a good tool just to share of how you started in your calling. So Natasha, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but do you think that there's one specific thing that God put you on the earth for and it's your job to find it?
I mean, our main job is to be disciples of every nation and to spread, the love of Jesus. And I think that looks different for every person, given the tools that you have, the interests that you have. And so I look at the field that you're in, and to some, that might not even look like ministry, right? To be an actress and this boss woman who has all of these different companies and, production and all that type of stuff. But at the same time, you're discipling to every single person that you come in contact with. And so I think that when someone says, well, I'm called to ministry, that doesn't necessarily mean you're working in a church. You could be on social media. You could be advocating for young girls. You could be on the set. You could be a school teacher. You could be doing it on, as like Max, who's just working, in his food and wine business, in sports, you could be doing it. It's really about the light that you can be in whatever industry. And so with that being said, I do think that God equips us and gives us gifts. And it's our job to even hone into those things, because it's what's going to make the biggest impact. And so if you have a gift with music, how can I use my voice to impact the kingdom, to worship him. If I have a gift of storytelling, how can I further the kingdom in that regard? If I have a gift of communication, how do I further the kingdom with those gifts? And so that's what I would say to that answer. What did that feel like? I was like,
that was great.
No, that was so good.
That was awesome. Allie, how would you encourage someone to find their calling when they're like, well, I don't have a musical talent. I don't know that I communicate that well. I'm just not even sure what I want to do. I don't even know where my talents are. What are some steps you think that someone could take to find them?
I think there are a ton of things you could do. I mean, just from personal experience, what do you love? Like I came to the place where I realized our desires aren't an accident. So what do you really love to do? And I honestly feel so blessed because we do live in a world right now where social media is a very real thing, and starting up your own businesses is actually a very available, real thing that anyone can do. I see so many different businesses out there that I wonder, how are they succeeding? But really, it was just a passion somebody had on their heart. And another thing that I always think about is there's a book in the Bible called Nehemiah. And basically in the story of Nehemiah gets a burden to go rebuild these walls in the Bible. And I think a lot of times I've realized in my life, when God's calling me to do something, it usually starts with a burden inside of me of, Lord, I feel like there's girls being left out. So how can I be the solution? Or I feel like there's not clean content out there. How can I be the solution? What burden do you have inside of you that you believe you might be able to be the solution to? And then just figuring out what that looks like, brainstorm it. Something that I think I really struggled with is waiting till I had everything figured out and perfect to start. And that was such a mistake, because the truth is you're never going to be ready ever. You got to get in the game to get good at it. Just take your first step, try something, be okay to fail because you're still moving forward. So that would be my advice.
That's great advice. But sometimes it's fearful because we want a buddy that's been through it.
Yeah.
Or whether that's a parent or someone that we know that's in that business that we're looking at. We don't even know where to start. So could you give some advice of like where to find, which I'm kind of saying that right now, like find someone that's already a few steps ahead of you or way ahead of you. So if you're thinking like, I want to take that first step, but I literally don't even know how. Like I have this amazing candle that I make, but I don't even know how to start to sell that or make them in bigger quantities. How do I get it out? What would you say to someone in helping them find a mentor or find someone that's been that step ahead?
I mean, what comes to my mind initially is YouTube is such an amazing search engine. And obviously, for me personally, I would love to have somebody in person mentoring me. But really, that's not my story a lot of the times. And so what do? I go straight to YouTube. I learned that if you surround yourself with people that are where you want to be, a lot of times you rise to that bar. And so just whatever that desire is, Googling, looking up people that have succeeded in that area, taking that first step. And I laugh about all of this, right? Because I would never think I would be doing what I am today. Back when I first started, it was actually spoken over me that I would never speak because truthfully, without God, I can't. But just know that when you take a first step, sometimes the career that you have or the calling you have might not be the very first thing that you start pursuing. But I take such comfort in the scripture that says, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. When you're delighting in him, he transforms his desires into align with yours, or he transforms ours to align with his. And he's going to tell us the next step. It's going to lead us on the right path. So.
Yeah, that's so good. And as a reminder, there's so many, I think there, again, are seasons of life, but that can change in your calling and your purpose. And I would say the end all purpose is to glorify God. That's what God calls us to do. Glorify God. It's pretty simple. The ways in which you do that can be your calling. You honor and glorify him, but then the secondary acts of what you do are just how you get to do it. So are you a musician? Can you glorify him through your music and the worship that you sing? If you are a creator, do you create content that is glorifying to him? And those seasons can change within our lives because, just as I've been an entertainer since I was 5 years old, there was then a season of my purpose right now. Again, we know that the core is to glorify God, but my season is motherhood right now when I had kids. So that shifted. So how do I glorify God within this season of motherhood? And eventually even going back to work, my mom was a stay-at-home mom for 20 some years and then decided to open a talent agency because she learned so much about us as kids when we were going through the business. And then my mom had this whole purpose and calling to be a talent agent and mentor other kids in the business and make sure that they had a good experience, the right experience, and place them with good projects as well. And, those clients knew that they had a mom that had already been through the industry with her kids and was coming from a Christian point of view.
It's cool.
So that calling can change within seasons, which I think is a real encouragement, especially to you guys in your 20s, saying that what you're choosing right now, that might be the very thing that you're going to stick with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But God may change that in different seasons of your life as well.
And I think that is such a common theme, especially within young adults, that you almost put your entire identity into what that is. And if it does shift, then you become super insecure. Well, I just lost this. I don't even know who I am. And I think that's why it's so important as believers, we know where we find our identity. And, it's not in the things that we do, but in who we are living our life for.
When did you find that? At what age? Because I know you came to Christ young, but when did you really feel that? Like, my identity isn't in what I do, but in who I am as a child of God. Either one of you can answer that. Because again, I think being raised up in a Christian home, for a lot of us, we can say, yeah, we've known the Lord for a long time, but I think there's most likely a moment that your perspective shifted and you're like, oh, this relationship is mine. I understand what my purpose is, to glorify God, not because my parents told me, but because I want to choose this relationship. I always feel most confident day to day when I know exactly what's in my makeup and skincare products. And honestly, the less ingredients necessary, the better. That's why I've wanted to try Adele Natural Cosmetics. Adele's faith-based values also play a role in the way they do business. Adele Natural Cosmetics believes that true beauty comes from the heart and strives to reflect that in everything they do. Read 1 Peter 3, verses 3 and 4. If you want to know more. I've personally been using the highlighter glow stick and the bronzer stick. Both products are super creamy, but not in a way that's overpowering, and they blend to perfection. I've been really impressed with them. And not to mention their beautiful selection of lipsticks. I absolutely love their colors. They protect and nourish your lips. They also offer personalized customer service with real people. Yay! And they even provide complimentary foundation color matching. All you have to do is reach out to customer service and ask. Follow Adele on Instagram, that's at Adele Natural Cosmetics, for lots of tutorials, behind the scenes, and encouraging content. And use my one-time code for 25% off your first order. That's the code Candace for 25% off your first order. Grand Canyon University, a private Christian university in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, believes that we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. GCU equips you to serve others in ways that promote human flourishing and create a ripple effect of transformation for generations to come. Matthew 5:16 says, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." By honoring your career calling, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's online, on-campus, and hybrid learning environments are designed to help you achieve your unique academic, personal, and professional goals. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
I talked about this in the identity podcast, but it really was my defining moment when I was in my room and I was crying about a boy, and the Lord spoke so clearly to me and told me, stop crying, acting like you're not worthy when I thought you were so worth it. I sent my son to die for you. And then he spoke the words chosen over me, which means to be selected as the best option. And in that moment, I have a ministry for girls called Chosen and Free that the Lord has grown. And the reason why it's called that is because when you really realize that you are chosen by God and he speaks those words to you, because I had heard this before. I grew up in the church, but it's different when you feel God speak it directly to you. And I really hope and pray that this moment in this podcast, or one of these, is one that God really uses to speak to you, because when he really spoke that and I chose to accept it, because I could deny it all day long, but I really accepted it. It freed me from every other insecurity in my life that I had. And it's not that I still don't deal with those things sometimes. They'll come to my head, but I know at the end of the day what God has said about me, and that my calling and the significance of it is not determined on whether or not I'm seen. I could be hidden for the rest of my life and be fully fulfilled and fully please God just out of obedience.
Yeah. It's so true. That's such a good reminder.
It's so freeing.
I know. Gosh, I think about Paul sitting in jail for all of those years. He wasn't being seen.
No.
I mean, maybe his friends were coming to feed him because someone had to come give you food. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to think that he was by himself for so many years in prison, writing all of those letters, completely glorifying God all the days of his life, but not being seen. Pretty amazing. Do you guys have anything else you want to add to finding your calling or purpose?
Mine would just, I do have something to add. And I don't even know if this is necessarily about calling, but I think that, and I touched on this, in the beginning, but I think when you're younger, there is a lot of pressure to know what you want to do or be gifted at something. I know that in our family, there's been a lot of people that have had such a specific gift, or there's something they're super passionate about, and then there's others that don't. And that can just be a little bit discouraging. And so to anybody who's in that in between, where I might like a lot of things, I'm not overly talented at one specific thing, I don't feel really called to communicate, I don't really feel skilled in, athletics or whatever. And again, I'm saying this all in the terms of, let's say our calling is to be in ministry and to share Christ and things like that. I would just encourage yourself to give yourself grace and also explore all options and avenues. I remember Papa had a really funny example of a friend who had done the same thing for like 40 years of his life. And then when he turned 45, he like completely pivoted and just went about doing his life totally different. And it never changed who he was, because that part of his life was just for a season. And so I think you have the ability to change so many things, but it doesn't change the epitome of who you are. And it's okay to like doing a lot of things. You don't have to do one thing. And I feel like there's this pressure. Oh, I have a calling. I have one purpose and I got to stick to it. And if I veer a little bit, then I'm not doing the right thing. And sometimes you have to figure it out.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're waking up today and you're deciding to delight in the Lord, that's a win. Like you said before,
you're fulfilling your calling for sure.
You're one step closer to him revealing what the next step is. And maybe he even is right now. And what I love about the story of your mom, who was called to be a stay-at-home mom for 20 years, and then she was called to start the agency, is I see how the Lord prepares in every single season that we're in. And it was in that season of motherhood and her being obedient to step back and really hone in on her family that God prepared her for where he had her next. And I think I talked about this before, but so many times we want to rush the process because maybe it's the pressures we feel from outside. Maybe it's pressures we put on ourselves. Like, I know you always say, I've got 50 coming up. I got my goals, right?
Yep.
But the truth is as long as we're delighting in him, we will not miss the preparation that he's doing in us right now because there's a purpose for where you're at. Don't miss it. When I was praying, Lord, what do you want to do with my life? And I felt like I was being so left behind. I literally felt like I was doing nothing. But I look back now, I would never have had the foundation to start social media had I not gone through that season that God was building my foundation with just me and him. When I thought he was doing nothing, he was still preparing me. Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, that's some good encouragement, ladies. Let's go to a listener question. This is from Stacy. She asks, what advice would you give to a young person considering majoring in theater and going into deep debt to get that degree? Okay, I thought this was going to be a theater question, but it's really about going into debt. And should she go into debt to get a degree?
What do you think, Candace?
This is kind of a loaded question.
I know, this is a big one.
I know, because this is really about, listen, I'm all about supporting dreams. So if that's the way in which you feel that you need to go through, like your route to a career in theater and you want to go the school route in getting that degree, I wouldn't sway you from it. I'm never a fan of anyone going into deep debt for anything. And that was kind of our rule. It wasn't a rule, but just something we encouraged our kids with college to know that if they truly wanted to go, that there was something on the line for them, that it wasn't just about mom and dad paying for college just so you could go and have fun for 4 years. And that's not to say all kids just go have fun for 4 years, but there is a majority, like a large percentage of kids that go to college for that reason, and parents who love to do that. We're not those parents. So if you want to go to college, it's because there's a real reason for it, and we will figure out the finances of it, but it's not just a free ride from us. And but it's a heavy burden to go into that much debt because we know how much schools cost these days, but you're going into $30,000, $40,000 of debt a year. There are ways to get a degree without having to go into debt. So I would just, that's why it's a loaded question. I don't know all the different circumstances surrounding Stacy, what's going on and what the desire of your heart is in majoring in theater.
Well, so I support you in theater. I love theater. I love theater too. I smiled when she said that because I was like,
I thought this was a musical theater question.
I know, that's what I thought.
Oh, I'm so excited.
And here's what I'll say, like you're going to learn so much in school, but you don't have to have a degree to be on stage. And I'm a prime example of that, even though I'm not in the theater, but as an entertainer. And it's not that I'm discouraging school in any way. But I just think there's ways to go about it without going into massive debt.
I kind of have a question for you, Candace, before we end. Because like Natasha said, you're a woman of so many talents. You have so many different businesses that have succeeded. And I just really wonder when it comes to you and your career and your calling, how you navigate starting something new. Like, for example, when God called you to start this podcast, was it something that you just felt and you started? Did you pray about it? Like maybe people are wondering what they're calling. How do I even know if God's called me to even step out in this area?
Yeah, there are definitely, thanks for asking that, Allie. There are definitely parts of my career and within my business that I've absolutely felt called to. And then there's some things because I have a company, I have people that work for me. And so there's ideas that are thrown around all the time that that don't all come from me, but it's like, and the podcast was actually one of them. I've been asked to do a podcast for several years by different companies, and I kept saying no to it. Why'd you just roll your eyes at me?
Because for the longest time, I remember both Lev and I were like, I think we want to start a podcast. My mom was like, no, that's not a good idea, guys. Fully shut us down for like years. I kid you not. Yes. And Lev and I were like, okay, I guess we're not going to tell Mom about our podcast idea. And then she comes out with the podcast.
But
Do you remember this?
I did. But I turned several podcast ideas down. I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. And some of the considerations were my time management. Like, what is going to be the purpose of the podcast? And is that the most efficient use of my time and my calling? And I'm doing things right now that I absolutely love, and they're taking a lot of my time. And so those are the factors that I weigh in. And then when one of the team members presented doing the podcast on our own and presented it in a way that, what about deep diving into a topic with, one guest co-host or two, like you guys are on both for one season? It's just that same person. And we talk about a lot of things. It's not just having a guest on every week, which again, that wasn't a good use of my time for me. And I thought, well, this is interesting, because if we could do a deep dive on a topic and things that I felt would really contribute to the listener in terms of things that are applicable in their life, that there's a takeaway moment and ways that I can share my faith. If this could be grounded in a Christian biblical worldview, okay, now that's ministry. Now the podcast is ministry to me, and I'm down for that. And then figuring out a solution into filming the episodes that, again, would just work with time management. So I wasn't doing like a podcast every day or 3 times a week, every single week. Like that wouldn't fit my lifestyle. So to do it in a truncated amount of time for a season, I'm like, this would work. So I very much prayed about the things that I'm doing. And again, some of them, the Lord's just like, this is what I want you to do. And they come to my mind, and it's so clearly God. So then I'll tell my team, hey, really want to do a theatrical movie that glorifies God, that is faith-based, and a couple years later we have a hire
girl.
So
that's fun.
It comes in all different ways.
That's such a great lesson in that, I feel like so many times in our culture, we just look to what's already been done to duplicate, when in reality, God wants to do something so new in us. And that might look like something that never has been done. And that's
so
powerful.
True. That has felt like my life. We have figured out solutions to a lot of no's in my life and my career. And so people have shut that door and said, no, that would never work. We've never done that before. And we come back and go, great, you've never done that before. Let us show you a way in which we can do that. And so, it's a good lesson for all of you guys that don't take a no at face value. And if someone tells you like, no, it's never been done, well, it doesn't mean God can't do that through you, and God can't do it differently through you.
Yeah.
So good.
That's good. Awesome. Guys, hugs. I love you. This is it.
Oh,
will you come back again someday?
I'm coming back. Putting you to the test, girl.
Just come back for dinner at least.
Come on, one more grandma voice for the road.
Little girls, I'm going to miss you so much.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. It was just the greatest blessing being on with you guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Allie, so much for joining us. And Natasha for coming back and bearing with your mom.
Of course. Couldn't have it any other way.
I absolutely loved it. Well, life is like a roller coaster, and it's so much better when we go through these ups and downs together. We created a gratitude guide for you this season with daily reminders and scripture readings. You can find that at Candace.com, and there's also a link in our show notes. Until next time, be grateful all day, every day. CandyRock Entertainment, all rights reserved.